Hello there, you are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the Daily Mirror columnist Susie Boniface and the Daily Telegraph's associate editor for politics, Christopher Hope. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. The poll conducted by The Eye suggests that 6 out of 10 voters would rather receive cash handouts than Liz Truss's preferred strategy for easing the cost of living crisis, that being tax cuts. The Times leads with Michael Gove describing Ms Truss's tax plans as a holiday from reality, as he announces his endorsement of her Tory leadership rival Rishi Sunak. The Telegraph hears that in a repeat of the strategy used at the height of COVID, the NHS will warn people to stay away from A&E departments during the winter unless they absolutely need them. The Guardian quotes Liz Truss saying the NHS should not be put on a pedestal. The Mail criticises the NHS for allegedly being too woke. The Mirror has word of Sir Alex Ferguson's testimony for the defence at the assault trial of his former player Ryan Giggs, who denies the charges against him. That's also the main story for The Star. The Express cites a government report suggesting the migrant crisis in the Channel could last for another 5 years. The FT has a story concerning the US stock market. The Sun reports that the actor Stephen Tompkinson, known for his roles in DCI Banks and Ballycus Angel, has been charged with grievous bodily harm following an incident in North Tyneside. He's pleaded not guilty. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Susie Boniface and Christopher Hope. Welcome to you both. Let's start with the Times and Michael Gove's endorsement of Rishi Sunak and quite harsh criticism of Liz Truss. It's come at the ninth hour, though, hasn't it, this endorsement? Is it a little bit too late, Christopher?
Well, I think with around nearly 2/3 of votes already cast, according to some polling, it's a bit too late. I wonder whether the Liz Truss team won't mind too much, because for a lot of the Brexiteers, Michael Gove is quite a toxic character, and his attack on Liz Truss won't be much of a surprise. He says in the Times page 1 here, and this is a big deal, this is the political story of tomorrow morning, he says that the Truss campaign has been a holiday from reality, and there has been a sense of phony war going on, when you've got all sorts of tax cuts flying about, plans for police, plans for schools, plans for everything, but not really enough to tackle what many have seen as the major issue, the cost of living crisis. That's what's worrying people, along with what might be a massive winter of discontent, which could bring the government very swiftly to its knees. There's a feeling right now, one of unreality, with the Prime Minister sitting in checkers with his trotters up, or in an island somewhere in the Mediterranean, while big issues are being faced here by families with no real political leadership. And that's what Gove's getting at in this hard-hitting piece. Also, very interestingly, he's revealing his exit from frontline politics in the Times. The Times, of course, where he used to work. He knows the Murdochs very well. Maybe he wants to get back to being a senior person at the Times again, where he was once. But this is maybe half a farewell from, I think, a brilliant politician who can get things done in Whitehall when he wants to. I think the work he's done in Whitehall over dealing with the issue of cladding and taking on those developers is to be hugely credited to him.
Yes, and he claims to be being, genuine. He says he's making his case for Sunak from his heart because he believes his frontbench career is over, whichever candidate wins. I do not expect to be in government again, but it was the privilege of my life to spend 11 years in the cabinet under 3 prime ministers. So speaking from the heart, and he genuinely believes that Rishi Sunak should be the next leader, Susie.
Yeah, and Gove actually backed Kemi Badenoch early on in the race. But, of course, she fell out quite a long time ago. She dropped out. So the fact that he's taken this long to declare who he thinks should win implies that perhaps it was a bit up in the air, or there was something else going on, that he was weighing things up in some way. Perhaps it wasn't a complete slam dunk. Who knows? Maybe he's just busy doing something else. He's not quite announcing his retirement from politics. He's just saying he doesn't expect to be in a government. Of course, he may be pleasantly surprised by a future prime minister happening to drop a peerage or a tsardom or something else in his lap. I don't doubt. He is quite nice about Liz in this piece, apart from her economic plans, which he calls this holiday from reality, and the fact that it's just going to devastate businesses across this country when the energy prices really kick in, because of course businesses, small businesses and bigger businesses do not get their energy capped. It's bad enough for the likes of us. I spent half of today arguing with my provider because they randomly pushed up my direct debit to an unreasonable amount, but at least my energy is capped. If you're running a small business, it is uncapped, and as your viewers have seen, there are businesses being given £70,000 bills that they just can't pay, and those businesses are shutting down. The fact that conservative politicians don't see the massive economic damage that is hanging just around the corner and coming at all of us, I find absolutely astonishing. And I find further astonishing that you've got two people who want to be prime minister, who are fighting for that, and for whom on day one the energy crisis is going to be the number one issue on their desk that they have to fix right now. And we don't have them arguing about the best way of doing it. Liz Truss just says there's going to be an emergency budget. She doesn't say what she's going to do. Rishi also is a little bit vague about things, although Chris will know more about the detail than me. But they're not putting their plan on the table for exactly how they're going to tackle this. And the fact they're not, I think, is a massive abdication of public duty, which is what Gove is showing in his column here. He's showing that he does have that sense of public duty, whether you agree with him or not. And he thinks Rishi does too. He seems less fulsome about Liz.
Just quickly before we move on, Christopher, do you agree with that analysis from Susie there, that they're not tackling the cost of living crisis urgently enough?
It's been raised, and you are seeing some support from Rishi Sunak. He wants to target those who need it most. Liz Truss is going for more of a wider tax-cutting agenda. Don't forget, we're dealing with just 160,000 people here, many of whom are quite well off. These are Tory members. We are basically witnessing it all, but looking in through the glass window. They're not talking to the rest of the country. They're talking to this group of people who, yes, and there's no question that, and Susie is right, on day one of them being Prime Minister on September the 6th, that will be front and centre. But until that point, the party are trying to weigh up whether this person is good at other areas too, transport, defence, health, everything else. So I think, to be fair to them, they are trying to discuss many different areas. They're not really, none of them are in power yet. Really, arguably, you have got Nadhim Zahawi calling in energy bosses last week, trying to get them to talk about cost of living crisis. He's doing papers now to try and present to the next prime minister, whoever that might be. So it's a confused picture on who's in charge, frankly, and that's part of the problem.
The Eye, majoring on Liz Truss's tax plans, they suggest that they're not popular with the public. They would rather be given money than have tax cuts be brought in. Susie?
Yeah, well, some people have said, Rishi Sunak's team says that Liz Truss's sort of announcement of tax cuts would give some families just £1 extra, which, of course, isn't going to cut the mustard when you get your energy bills. And, what they actually need is help with the debt they have now, not perhaps a reassessment of how much comes out of their pay packet or they get via the tax man, it's a few months hence. That's just going to be too late. And although it's perfectly fair, like for Chris to say, the two leadership candidates have got lots of different issues they're arguing about, and then they're trying to lay out their stall for it and all the rest of it. And in normal circumstances, I'd say, well, that's what they should be doing. But right now, the next prime minister, whoever it is not going to have the time to talk about agricultural subsidies or the relationship with the EU or, what's going to happen with Ukraine. Because on day one, if you don't fix the cost of living crisis and the cost of energy somehow or another, then you're not going to get to day 6, right? The government is going to fall very quickly if they don't get this sussed. It's the biggest and the only thing they should be talking about. The other stuff is a luxury.
Well, one other thing that Liz Truss certainly is talking about, Christopher, is the NHS, which she doesn't believe should be put on a pedestal. That's in the Guardian.
That's right. I think that goes back to, I mean, I was watching the GB News hustings, number 9 of 12 today, earlier before I came on air. I mean, there's a huge applause when the leaders, challengers, they're asked, will you not put the NHS on a pedestal? Will you deal with waste in the NHS? These are things which the Tories have been thinking about going back into the mid-noughties. And I think Liz Truss is showing her the reason why she's a front runner. She's not willing. She's forgive me. She's not going to put things on a pedestal. She will take on areas where the left think are sacrosanct. I think that makes her quite popular amongst the grassroots. And that's why even the Guardian is saying that won't do any harm at all.
OK, thank you both for the moment, Christopher and Susie. We're going to take a break. Coming up, the Finnish Prime Minister agrees to take a drugs test after being filmed dancing at a party. But is there a double standard at work in terms of her gender? We'll discuss that next. You're watching the press preview. Still with me, Susie Boniface and Christopher Hope. Let's take a look at the Telegraph front page. And Susie, take us into this story. The NHS telling people to stay away from A&E ahead of the winter. Why?
Well, they're planning sort of a bit of a publicity blitz to say, look, we're going to be under a lot of strain this winter. Please don't, please help us to help you, sort of thing. But it's pointed out by medics in there. And I think anybody who's had to go to hospital, whether it's a false alarm or not, would probably find that this rings true, that the correct person to make a decision about whether or not you need medical treatment is the doctor, is the medic, is the person who's doing the triage when you get into hospital. So if you are the kind of person who's going to go to hospital for something that you don't need to go to hospital for, the fact that the hospital says is it an emergency, make sure you want to think about it, actually you're not going to stay away. You're still enough of an idiot to go to hospital because you've got an ingrown toenail. However, if you're the kind of person who goes, oh, I don't know, is this a rash? Is this something I need to worry about? I best stay away from hospital. Actually, you're the one the doctor does want to see because it can theoretically be something appalling and awful, and they want you to go to hospital. They want to see you, and they really want to tell you it's nothing too serious. I had to go to A&E a little while ago with my 6-year-old who had suspected appendicitis. We went through a whole rigmarole of different doctors and everything else, and it turned out to be just a bug. But every single doctor we saw said, no, you did the right thing bringing her in. You did the right thing. It could have been serious. We have to see her. We want to tell what the problem is. And so the medics are saying this whole business of keeping people away to save the NHS, actually, it keeps away the people we need to see. It doesn't stop the time wasters. And there is better ways of doing it. A more effective system of triage for the walking wounded in A&E would probably do a better job than this kind of thing, which we saw during the COVID lockdowns and, of course, meant that a lot of people went without the treatment they needed.
Christopher, do you think people are going to stay away?
I agree with what Susie said. I think that they if you've got a problem, you should go to the doctor. And this is going to, I mean, coming in the context of this change of government we're going to see in less than 2 weeks' time. This is an example of why many think the NHS needs to try and work out what it's doing. Fewer managers, more frontline staff. There are ways round this. There's a guy called Professor Tim Briggs who has done some work on this to show that you can get it right first time. The NHS can do better with the money it's got, less waste. And I think it will be frustrating for a lot of people in government on the Tory side that this is happening so early in the summer. We're nowhere near the winter crisis. Everyone knows that flu is worse in winter. We're still in August. It's still hot outside.
Let us turn to the FT, Susie, and the Finnish Prime Minister's right to party, or fight to party even.
Well, it's not quite that. What's happened here is that the Finnish Prime Minister, who's only in her 30s and is very young and very beautiful, and has had a little bit of scandal previously for going out clubbing when she should have been getting a COVID alert to stay at home, has been the subject of what can only really be described as an internet campaign by far-right trolls in Finland, because this video has come out. It's very brief. They have claimed in this video that they're talking about cocaine by using the word flower. in Finnish drug culture. Apparently, I'm informed, not an expert on it, but I'm told that that's not a euphemism for cocaine at all in Finland, and it can't even really be heard on the video. And because of the pressure, because of the 4chan, the internet trolls who have pushed and pushed and pushed this, and people who really don't like a woman, and perhaps as well some kind of connection from the old Petersburg troll factories run by Vladimir Putin, because he's very upset with Sanna Marin and her attempts to get Finland closer to NATO as a result of his aggression in Ukraine. That's kind of created a scandal where there really wasn't one. It's a young woman dancing with some friends when she didn't have anything else to do. And what's wrong with dancing? You know, we've had Michael Gove dancing in a nightclub, looking off his face. It was just a bit of an amusement. We got Boris Johnson doing goodness knows what half the time with goodness knows whom. And again, it's not a big issue, but when a woman does
we're running out of time. Just very quickly, Christopher's looking perplexed. Very quickly, Christopher.
I was trying to say, I mean, come off it, Susie. I mean, here's a world leader here who's dancing around like a maniac on screen here, and people are saying, is she okay? Well, she volunteered to take a drugs test. I mean, why are you bringing in all sorts of conspiracy theories involving Russians? I mean, surely it is what it is.
I'm not bringing it in. That's how the scandal, that's how the story developed. That's why it's the story.
But she must accept that, given she's now accepted to have a drugs test to clear the air. I mean, it's just a question of, is it appropriate for someone on the world stage to behave like that in a dancing video? I think Michael Gove was embarrassed by that dancing in the nightclub in August 2 years ago.
Christopher and Susie, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. You'll have to pursue your debate off air for the moment.